Those cheeky buggers. Those cheeky buggers. As soon as I finish recording my audio, as soon as I finish cleaning it up, as soon as I stick it in the movie maker, they go and pass the bill through the Senate. And that means I have to re-record, which is kind of funny. It's like that old description from that Halo game. They don't make prosthetic situational awareness.
Ooh. Oh, that's it. I'm gonna report this to me Member of Parliament. Hey, Gus! I got something to report to you.
That's a bloody outrage, it is. I want to take this all the way to the Prime Minister.
So what exactly am I talking about here? What bill has been passed through both the House of Representatives and the Australian Senate? Well, it's called the MedEvac bill. It was proposed by Wentworth Independent Karen Phelps, the lady who took the safe Wentworth seat from the Liberal Party, and it also has the backing of the Australian Labor Party. It allows for asylum seekers in detention to be let into Australia if they are found to be unwell by 2 doctors. Now, this assessment of health doesn't have to be conducted in person. It can be done over Skype. That was something that was specifically mentioned. And this is pretty interesting to me because I'm not a doctor, but if you want to get the best results in determining whether someone is sick or not, surely it's better to be in the room with them so you can prod and poke them and all that stuff. Today I went to a health and fitness assessment for my upcoming apprenticeship, and I went in the room and I got prodded and poked and stripped down and all that good stuff, had to pee in a cup. Then I realised it was in the wrong place and I had to go somewhere else, but that's fine, don't worry about that. But the point is, I was in the room with them and someone was physically there with me. I was being tapped on the knee with a hammer, I had to cough, and they were feeling me at the time to see if I had a hernia and things like that. And I'm just not 100% sure, in my amateur opinion, whether you can get the best results, the best idea of whether someone is healthy or not, if you're just taking the call over Skype. Alright, getting back on track. This MedEvac bill only applies to asylum seekers currently in detention, and Bill Shorten came out and affirmed that this was so. It doesn't apply to any new people turning up to Australia. But a valid criticism that was made by Scott Morrison, and I'm assuming most of the Liberal Party, is that this information is not going to be made known to customers of people smuggling. All they're going to hear is, hey, the game's back on, people are being let back into Australia, this people smuggler is telling me so, now I'm going to pay a bunch of money to jump in a shitty boat and try and cross the ocean. There's a pretty good chance that this bill passing the Senate could lead to more preventable deaths at sea. Yes, I absolutely believe that. It's just basic supply and demand. Previously, I was going to say today, but previously there was no supply in Australia for people smuggling. If you attempted to come here, you would not be settled in Australia. You would be shipped off to an offshore detention centre. But now, there is at least the appearance of supply. You know, the people smugglers can say to people, look, people are being let into Australia now, and people go, great, and the demand will meet the supply, and people will jump in shitty boats and try and cross the ocean. So that's the problem as I see it in the short term. This bill will encourage the people smuggling trade to begin again. But what's the problem in the long term? Well, the problem I believe in the long term is that this caveat of it's only for people currently in detention will be changed to, yeah, anyone who turns up to Australia, if they're sick, we'll let them in because we don't want them to die or whatever. And with the Liberal Party set to lose the next election by all predictions, but again, polling, think of the 2016 election, I'm not completely giving up hope, but it doesn't look great. The way things are looking at the moment, Labor does look quite upsurgent, so I do expect them to win more seats in the next election and possibly even the Prime Ministership. And if they get the seats, then they can just ram through an amendment to this bill, removing the caveat, and essentially, as I've said, anyone who arrives to Australia and is unwell can get in. Well, there is a bit of a problem with that, and we've got to think about what health and wellness are. Health and wellness are relative concepts. If you think of a healthy cancer patient and you think of a healthy young man, the standards aren't quite the same. The healthy cancer patient can get out of bed, feed himself, can walk without bending over double and vomiting up his breakfast and stuff like that, whereas the healthy young man is able to go running for miles, get himself out of bed no problem, feed himself, keep his food down. It's not the same thing. There is no objective standard for health because it varies from category to category. So there's a pretty important question you've got to ask yourself. Do you honestly expect anyone who has fled a third world country, potentially a war zone, endured a dangerous cross-sea journey and is now being held in detention to be considered healthy relative to a Western standard? And it will be a Western standard because the goal is to get as many people from the third world into the first world as possible, because people from the third world vote overwhelmingly for the left and they vote overwhelmingly for authoritarianism. It's just like what we're seeing in America with the Democrats refusing to fund even 1/5 of Trump's wall. Because if the supply of illegal immigrants into America is cut, then the Democrats have just lost a large voter base. So some of you might watch this video and say, look, we understand that they're going to be let into Australia on medical grounds, but doctors aren't idiots, they're not just going to let anyone through. Well, I say we have a little look at Australia's track record for letting people in on medical grounds. In 2014, a man was flown from offshore detention to Australia to remove a kidney stone. He has since remained in country. Just last year, October 2018, a woman is evacuated to Australia to treat severe stomach pain. It was discovered that she was suffering from constipation. Her evacuation cost the taxpayers $100,000 and she has since remained in country. I'm going to repeat that again. Her evacuation cost the taxpayers $100,000. It is estimated that nearly 900 people have already been transferred from offshore detention into Australia on medical grounds. Almost half of the people transported were not even sick, they were merely accompanying the sick individual. And what essentially happens is once someone gets to Australia, it's a lot harder to get them out because we have a lot of pro bono refugee lawyers who will fight to keep people here essentially. Once they're in, it's a lot harder to get them out again. All this talk of health and disease has actually reminded me of something that people hardly ever bring up when discussing mass immigration from the third world. But something to think about is the prevalence of diseases. It is entirely possible that people moving from the third world to the first world could bring with them diseases that people from the first world have almost no defense against. If we think of Australian history, remember that when the settlers came to Australia, they brought with them smallpox, which absolutely decimated the indigenous Aborigine population. I believe the same thing occurred in the States as well. We could honestly see a repeat of this with the current Ebola outbreak in the Congo. It's currently tracking its way around, moving towards urban zones like Butembo and things like that. And honestly, if it reaches the north coast and someone is infected, either knowingly or not, and they jump on one of these boats that crosses the Mediterranean, they hit Italy, Spain, France, anything like that, these people aren't detained, they're just allowed to go into society. You could honestly have someone with Ebola just wander into Europe. That could happen within the next few months. So yes, in regards to this MedEvac bill being passed through the Senate and becoming law, we can expect the people smuggling trade to start up again. More boats will be attempting to reach Australia, regardless of whether they'll actually be able to get here or not, which results in more people dying at sea. Good on you guys, really thinking of the children there. Furthermore to this, if Labor gains more power in the House and the Senate, we could see the restriction on this bill removed, and essentially anyone who arrives to Australia and is not in peak health will be allowed to let in and let their potentially infectious diseases run amok through the population. Also, on another happy note, Australia may, of course, rejoin the UN Global Compact for Migration, which would essentially erase Australia's borders. To close off, I'm going to share with you a really insightful comment that I read whilst doing research for this topic. The ability to maintain one's own borders and decide who may and who may not enter is one of the defining characteristics of a sovereign nation. When such a basic thing is thrown to the wind, the country, such as it is, ceases to function as a political/sociological entity and becomes, at best, a geographic expression with no shared or common history, belief system, laws, or culture. Consider places such as Afghanistan or the Ukraine, significant territories, but in truth, merely headless states, fundamentally dysfunctional, if not downright dangerous places to live. Thanks all for sticking around, and have a good one.